In 1974, a fire consumed the Ashford Orphanage, killing 6 children and 2 staff members. Or at least, that's what the official records say. But decades later, a group of urban explorers stumbled upon something inside the ruins, something that forced investigators to reopen the case. And what they uncovered would challenge everything the town thought it knew about that night. Before we dive deeper into this story, if you enjoy chilling mysteries, forgotten cases, and the kind of secrets most people would rather stay buried, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a case like this one. The Ashford Orphanage sat on the edge of Pine Hollow, a rural town surrounded by dense forests and back roads. Built in the 1920s, it was a looming structure, red brick walls streaked with soot even before the fire, windows so narrow they looked more like prison slits than a child's bedroom view. For the children who grew up there, Ashford wasn't a home. It was a place of whispers, locked doors, and long nights where rules seemed to matter more than kindness. One survivor, now in her 50s, recalled, "We weren't allowed to laugh too loud. We weren't allowed to ask questions. But the strangest rule was the one about the basement. We were told never to go near it, no matter what." On a freezing November night, flames erupted inside the orphanage. Firefighters later said the blaze was so fierce that the building was engulfed in minutes. By the end of the night, 6 children and 2 staff members were reported dead. But survivors have long disputed the official account. One man, just 10 years old at the time, remembered, "I could still hear screaming long after they said the roof collapsed. It wasn't from upstairs. It sounded like it was coming from underneath us." The superintendent, Harold Crane, stood in the street as the fire raged. Witnesses later described his strange calmness, watching silently while the building burned. Within weeks, the site was closed off and eventually abandoned. A memorial plaque in town bore the victims' names, and Ashford Orphanage faded into history. Or so people thought. For decades, the orphanage became a local legend. Teenagers dared each other to sneak into the ruins. Some swore they heard phantom cries in the night, others claimed to see shadowy figures in the broken windows. But in 2001, a group of urban explorers entered with flashlights and camcorders, hoping for thrills. Instead, they found something chilling. In the rubble-strewn basement, half buried under collapsed beams, they discovered a sealed metal door. After hours of clearing debris, they forced it open, and stepped into a room untouched by the fire. Inside, everything was preserved. Dusty shelves stacked with children's shoes. Wooden tables covered in toys, a few still neatly arranged. And journals, stacked in a corner, their covers warped with age but legible. One explorer later said, "It was like the kids had just stepped out for recess and never came back." The fire destroyed the rest of the orphanage, but this room, it was frozen in time. The journals appeared to belong to several children. The handwriting was uneven, shaky, but the words were unmistakable. One entry read, "We are not allowed upstairs. They say we must stay down here until the fire comes." Another, "The man in the black coat visits at night. He says the fire will hide everything." But the final entry was the most chilling. "They told us we won't go back upstairs again. They said no one will find us." The explorers turned the journals over to authorities, who briefly reopened the case. But within months, the investigation was closed again, citing inconclusive evidence. That decision didn't stop rumors. Some believed the children had been locked in the basement intentionally, their deaths disguised as victims of the fire. Others thought the journals were fakes, perhaps planted by staff to scare away intruders. Yet survivors' memories pointed in the same direction. A former resident confessed, "I remember hearing someone crying under the floorboards. I told a staff member. She told me to shut my mouth." In 2016, the journals were tested with modern forensic techniques. Analysts found fingerprints belonging to children whose names never appeared on the memorial plaque. Who were these children? Why weren't they listed among the dead? And why were their names absent from every record? The revelations forced investigators back to the orphanage ruins. Using ground-penetrating radar, they scanned beneath the basement floor. What they found was not supposed to exist. Beneath the ashes, beneath the very room that time forgot, was a hidden chamber. Inside were human remains, and a locked trunk. But when they pried it open, what they found was far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. The chamber was no larger than a storage closet. The air inside was stale, untouched for decades. Scattered across the dirt floor were bones, small, brittle, unmistakably belonging to children. Forensic teams estimated at least 4 individuals, all under the age of 12. But these children were not on the orphanage memorial plaque. Officially, they had never existed. The locked trunk found inside the chamber offered another piece of the puzzle. Inside were dozens of small identification tags, each bearing a name. Yet none of those names appeared in the orphanage's official records. Theories spiraled out of control. Some believed the orphanage had been secretly housing unregistered children, children taken without paperwork, hidden away in the basement. Others speculated something darker: trafficking, illegal adoption, even medical experiments. But the journals, found both in the trunk and in the sealed room above, painted a picture far more disturbing. One entry read, "They tell us the fire will keep us safe. They tell us the fire will make people stop asking." Who was they? And what were the children being kept safe from? Attention turned once again to Harold Crane, the orphanage superintendent who had overseen Ashford for more than 20 years. In archived correspondence, investigators found letters between Crane and a private institution in another state. The language was vague but unsettling, filled with references to transfers, special cases, and final resolutions. One line, dated just months before the fire, read, "The fire will resolve all questions." To some, this was damning evidence of intent. To others, it was too cryptic to prove anything. Former staff and residents, now elderly, began to speak out. Their memories conflicted, but all pointed towards something unusual in the basement. One former cook recalled, "The children weren't supposed to be down there. But the locks, they weren't to keep outsiders out. They were to keep the kids in." Another survivor, just a teenager at the time of the fire, confessed, "We always thought the fire was an accident. But I saw Mr. Crane carrying boxes out of the building the day before. I asked him what they were. He told me, 'Don't worry. After tomorrow, no one will ask questions anymore.'" In 2016, DNA testing on the bones revealed partial matches to several families who had reported missing children in the early 1970s. None of those families had ever been told their children were at Ashford Orphanage. In fact, according to official records, they were never admitted at all. This suggested a horrifying possibility: the orphanage had taken in children off the books, children who disappeared from their families without explanation. But how did they end up in a sealed chamber beneath the basement? And why had no one spoken up? Perhaps the most haunting discovery came from the trunk, a photograph, faded and cracked with age. It showed a group of at least 10 children, standing in the orphanage basement. Behind them, half-shrouded in shadow, was a tall figure in a black coat. Survivors immediately recognized the room, but none could identify the children. They weren't listed on any intake forms. They weren't on the memorial plaque. Officially, they never existed. One former resident whispered upon seeing it, "Those are the ones we heard crying." Despite the remains, the journals, and the photograph, the case was once again declared inconclusive. Authorities cited a lack of definitive proof tying the evidence to specific individuals or crimes. Without living suspects to prosecute, the files were quietly shelved. But for the families of the missing, the message was clear: the fire had not been an accident. It had been a cover-up. The ruins of Ashford Orphanage were demolished in 2019, replaced with an empty lot. But locals say the land has never felt settled. Urban explorers who camped nearby report hearing faint cries at night, or the sound of small footsteps rustling through the grass. One explorer swore, we left a toy car on the ground as a kind of offering. When we came back the next morning, it was gone. Today, the official record still lists 8 deaths at Ashford Orphanage. But the bones beneath the floor, the journals that speak of the fire as a plan, and the photograph of children who never existed, tell a different story. Were the children victims of negligence, or of something far darker? To this day, no one knows who the forgotten children of Ashford truly were, or why their voices were silenced.